This is Murderous Minors, Killer Kids, bringing you the frightening and truly insane tales of children with the thirst to kill. Kindergarten through 12th grade murderers. True stories thoroughly researched. Join us weekly for new tales of parents' worst nightmares on Murderous Minors, Killer Kids. Episode number 12, The Prozac Defense.
Juvenile court officials confirmed today they are seeking a petition of first-degree murder against a 15-year-old suspect for the killing of 9-year-old Elizabeth Olten.
Having friends nearby always made after school and weekends so much more fun. Gathering out in the neighborhood, running up to each other's doors to round up the whole gang usually resulted in some good times. The more the merrier, right? It was the same for 9-year-old Elizabeth Olten back in 2009. Living in rural, tiny St. Martin's, Missouri, located around the middle of the state, she had an older brother and an older sister to play with, plus the neighbor kids. A dense patch of woods separated the family's homes, but the 11-year-old twin boys and 6-year-old girl living there with their older half-sister, Alyssa Bustamante, made convenient playmates. By all accounts, the children being raised there by their grandparents hadn't had the easiest of upbringings. Alyssa, at 15, was the oldest of the four and had endured the more tumultuous childhood, having seen her mother overdose at the age of 6. Following that incident, her grandparents gained legal custody while her mother attempted to achieve stability in her life, a difficult feat when battling addiction. The children were moved from California to Missouri to have a fresh start in their grandparents' seemingly loving Christian home. By then, Alyssa's father was incarcerated, doing a 10-year stretch for multiple felony assault charges. Her bedroom showcased a collection of correspondence from him. Her one-time friend would later elaborate that he had stabbed someone. Although in her grandparents' custody since the age of 7, her more stable home life did not exempt her from feelings of depression, which led to cutting and more self-harm. A former friend would later comment that Alyssa tried to hang herself at age 11. Alyssa, age 13, attempted suicide by ingesting a bottle of pills. Her grandmother recognized the need for professional intervention, and Alyssa was under the care of a mid-Missouri mental health hospital, Pathways Behavioral Health Care, and had been inpatient for 10 days. She had been taking Prozac ever since. 9-year-old neighbor Elizabeth Olten's father was also in prison, and she lived with her mom, Patty, and her 2 older siblings. Elizabeth had been practicing enthusiastically on the afternoon of Wednesday, October 21, 2009, singing and rehearsing lines for a play the 4th grader was to be in at Pioneer Trails Elementary School. Her mother was busy in the kitchen as her kids hung around the house. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, Elizabeth had annoyed her brother enough that, when the 6-year-old neighbor from next door came by, Patty succumbed to the pressure of the little girls begging and pleading. The agreement was that Elizabeth was to be home in an hour, giving Patty time to get dinner done. This would also ensure that Elizabeth would be home before the sun set. The woods dividing the girls' homes was over 100 acres, which quickly turned daunting in the waning daylight into darkness. Once 6:15 comes and goes, Patty phones the neighbor's house, only to hear the disturbing news from Alyssa's grandmother that Elizabeth had never been to their house that evening. Patty calls 911 at 6:35 p.m. and officers soon arrive and begin to search the dark expanse of forest. By 10 p.m., approximately 100 law enforcement officers and citizen volunteers had joined in to look for the 9-year-old to no avail. As the night wore on, hypothermia and exposure-induced injury became genuine concerns. The child was certainly not dressed to spend the night out in the elements. By Thursday, October 22nd, there was still no sign of Elizabeth. Multiple law enforcement entities joined the search, including the FBI. Elizabeth's mother had been repeatedly calling her cell phone, but it just went to voicemail. The FBI had the ability to quickly receive data from the cell phone provider indicating that the phone was somewhere within the 80 to 90 area acre of woods dividing the playmates' homes.
The number of volunteers and law enforcement across the state have tripled since last night to more than 300 people. They're covering a half-square-mile grid search near Elizabeth Olten's home that is just behind me. She went missing last night around 6 p.m. on her way home from a friend's house just 4 blocks away. The search has not ended since then. There's no decision if or when it will end, and no Amber Alert has been issued. The FBI is even involved trying to track a cell phone that she may have had on her. But for now, we wait.
K-9 scoured the ground while helicopters searched from above and divers examined every inch of the ponds hidden amid massive trees. 1/3 of the 1,200 citizen population of St. Martin's, Missouri turned out to look for Elizabeth that day. The FBI went about the business of conducting interviews, starting with the 6-year-old neighbor who came and got Elizabeth to play at her house. The first grader initially said that she played with Elizabeth outside and then they each went home. However, she subsequently changed her story to include the fact that she had toppled into a thorn bush, calling out for Alyssa to come untangle her. Alyssa successfully pried her out of the thorns, then told the first grader to run along home. The search for 9-year-old Elizabeth reached further into the woods. Sergeant David Rice was informed by the team that an unnerving discovery had been made, a freshly filled grave. He and his colleagues began looking at the area as a legitimate crime scene. Simultaneously, 15-year-old Alyssa Bustamante was interviewed by the FBI, while an intent to search the premises was served on her home. It was the last reported whereabouts of the missing child. Sergeant Rice recalled seeing 2 FBI agents bringing Alyssa to the fresh grave, where he heard her tell the agents that she had been the one to dig the grave. When Sergeant Rice asked her why, Alyssa innocently explained that she just enjoyed it and used them to bury dead animals. It was noted that while every other neighborhood kid was accounted for that day, Alyssa had incurred her first absence from school, uncharacteristic of the normally dedicated student. Alyssa was described as calm, polite, and willing to help, as she let authorities know that she had ditched school that day, but that she hadn't seen Elizabeth. While the search of her home continued, an agent was assigned to search her bedroom and was shocked at what she found. Weird phrases and illustrations adorned the walls, one written in blood, stating that it was written in blood. A bizarre picture of a girl had been drawn, also seemingly in blood, with slash marks depicted on her arms and head. The caption next to it read her 6-year-old sister's name. One section is devoted strictly to letters her father wrote from prison. Another corner of the room was adorned with this poem: I cut to focus when my brain is racing. I cut to make physical what I feel inside. I cut to see clear because I like it. I don't like to cut, but I can't give it up. But the most shocking, most damning piece of evidence against the 15-year-old was the journal she wrote in regularly, like many girls her age. This journal, however, had the entry for the previous day, Wednesday, October 21st, almost completely scribbled over. Only the last line was left untouched. The agent, however, was able to make out a few words, including slit and throat. Given her strange behavior regarding graves the day before, Sergeant Rice headed to FBI headquarters on Friday, October 23rd, for an interview that he felt would rapidly become an interrogation. He decided to use silence as a strategy. His main offensive tactic would be to punctuate their minimal conversation with long pauses, finding it to be a successful maneuver at inducing discomfort. He recollected there to have been pauses up to a full minute. Once Sergeant Rice is informed of the journal, he asks her about it directly. He lets Alyssa know that they have searched her bedroom, they have her journal, and they've examined the scribbled-over page. She finally began to crack. As she let investigators know that she did see Elizabeth yesterday, her grandmother began to get upset. She began her confession by saying that, as the two were walking in the woods, Elizabeth fell and hit her head and died accidentally. Silence. Then Rice explained that they knew what happened, that they will eventually locate Elizabeth's body and they will ascertain her official cause of death. He asked if they will find Elizabeth with a slashed throat, to which Alyssa answered yes. Her grandmother broke down in sobs as the granddaughter she had raised for almost 10 years seemingly began to admit to knowing more about this child's disappearance. Once her grandmother left the interrogation room, Alyssa began to tell the tragic tale. She told investigators that her younger sister had fetched Elizabeth only because Alyssa had asked her to do so. Once the little girls returned, Alyssa had sent her sister home, luring Elizabeth into the woods. She got her to follow along by telling her that there was a surprise waiting for her in the woods. They walked into the dusky trees a quarter-mile deep, taking at least 15 minutes. 15-year-old Alyssa Bustamante took 9-year-old Elizabeth Olten by the hand, leading her into the woods with the intent to kill her. She described to authorities leading Elizabeth to an already dug grave, one of the 2 graves Alyssa had dug the previous Friday, a school holiday. Alyssa described how she brought with her a knife from her kitchen and she used it to abruptly try to slice Elizabeth's throat, though unsuccessfully. She turned to strangling instead, telling detectives that she strangled the young girl until all light had gone from her eyes. Only then did she stab her 8 times, one strike piercing through her breastbone, heart, and spine, ending her attack by slicing the child's neck. Elizabeth was then dragged into the grave, covered with dirt, then leaves and branches. Alyssa returned home and cleaned herself up, then wrote in her journal, "I just fucking killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them, now they're dead. I don't know how to feel at the moment. It was amazing. As soon as you get over the, oh my god, I can't do this feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kinda nervous and shaky though right now. Kay, I gotta go to church now. LOL." She then attended a teen dance at church as Patty Price was phoning her grandma and then the police. As she had just begun to worry, her youngest child had already been murdered. When asked why she would commit such a thoughtless crime, Alyssa simply stated that she wanted to know how it felt. On October 23rd, 2 days after Elizabeth's disappearance, Alyssa led investigators to the second grave she had dug, which contained the child's body. The following day, the Jefferson City High School sophomore who had never missed a class was arrested and charged with first-degree murder along with armed criminal action for use of the kitchen knife. When examined after being taken into custody, more than 300 scars from self-harm were visible on the 15-year-old's body. Friends would report that she had expressed interest in what killing another person would feel like at her own 15th birthday party. A week after her murder, 9-year-old Elizabeth Olten's pink casket was transported to the cemetery by way of horse-drawn carriage. Gone was the youngest child of 3 who loved horses, Taylor Swift, and baking cookies. Hey guys, please have a listen to these promos from my friends at American Slacker Podcast and Hop Nation USA. You may hear something you like. Links to their info is in the show notes.
Do you like craft beer?
Uh-huh.
Do you like an unending wealth of puns?
Uh-huh.
What about 4-hour lectures on the ethics of cryptocurrency usage in third world nations?
No!
Oh, right.
But do you still want craft beer reviews and comedy, right?
Uh-huh.
Then listen to Hop Nation USA, a craft beer podcast.
Available on iTunes, Podbean, Google Music Play, and Stitcher.
Are you shitting me?
No, I'm not. Just listen to the podcast. Hop Nation USA.
Where all fine podcasts are sold.